Chapter 3. I maintain the prohibitive system has too much sway. The directly or indirectly granting monopolies is far too extensively practiced. As a nation, we are so unreasonable as to expect to export without importing, and of course find ourselves disappointed. It would be easy to tell of articles of great consumption, which left entirely to themselves, or even with the imposition of a reasonable duty, would be of moderate price, but which, by the heavy taxes laid upon their importation, are raised exceedingly above their natural value. I will select for the proof of this assertion, one or two articles. First, to speak of sugar. In the trade in this article, the mischief caused by high duties and a system of monopoly consequent upon them, is strikingly exhibited. Sugar is a necessary of life. Some may maintain that it is a luxury, but this is looking at the matter in a very confined view. Sugar now enters extensively into the diet of every class of the population of this country, and to the people at large I appeal, especially to the poorer classes, whether its present exorbitant price is not severely felt, and whether they would not receive a great benefit indeed, if they could procure it at half its present cost. I therefore maintain, that it has become an absolute necessary of life, and that we should be allowed to supply ourselves with it at as cheap a rate as possible. Let us now see how it is affected by the commercial system which I have been denouncing. The quantity of sugar annually produced in different parts of the world is estimated at about 18 millions of cwts. Of this vast quantity England consumes about 1/5 of the 18 millions of cwts. The British possessions produce 4, and foreign countries and their dependencies, the remaining 14. Now justice and common sense demand, that if the nation is able to obtain from foreign countries her sugar at a much less price than the British possessions can or will sell it her, she should be allowed to do so. But no, she is prevented dealing with the countries which collectively produce the 14 million of cwts, and confined to the said British possessions, which can only supply her with the 4 millions, no more than 24s. per cwt. Duty is imposed on the importation of sugar from our own colonies and possessions, while we prohibit the importation of foreign sugar by a duty of 63s. Now surely such a protection as this is most unreasonable. Surely it is unjust that the whole of a great nation should suffer a grievous injury, for the sake of giving a very small part of that nation an iniquitous monopoly. That the nation does suffer a grievous injury is evident, when we consider that it is calculated that this colonial protection, as it is termed, cost the people of this country in the last year, 5 millions of pounds sterling, in consequence of their being prevented consuming foreign sugar, and confined to that produced by the British possessions. In fact, this monopoly is more injurious than that of the Corn Laws, as it has been justly observed, by means of the sliding scale. The importation of foreign corn may and does take place, but the 63s. Duty on foreign sugar never varies. In coffee also, the West India planters have a monopoly. The duty on coffee, the growth of British possessions, is 6d. per pounds, on that imported from places within the East India Company's territories, not the growth of British possessions. The duty is 9d. per pounds, while is 3d. per pounds is levied on coffee imported from foreign countries. The quantity of coffee produced annually in the various countries of the world, is estimated at upwards of 359 millions of pounds, of which, only 17 millions of pounds are produced by our own possessions, and inasmuch as our consumption of this article reached, in 1838, to 25 millions of pounds, our own possessions really cannot supply us. Yet are we, by high duties, virtually restricted from any other market. We cannot supply ourselves with the coffee we require, from the remaining 300 millions of pounds, except at a great disadvantage. Hence, the high price of this article, and the extensive adulteration of it which is practiced. A great quantity of chicory especially, is mixed with coffee, to reduce it. The price of which article is regularly quoted in the established prices current, under the same head as coffee. Coffee also, it may be observed, has become essential to the comfort of the British nation. I mention these two cases as examples, to show the injurious operation of restrictions on trade, and monopolies. It must not be supposed that they are the only ones which could be brought forward. Many more might be mentioned, but my object is, To expose the absurdity and mischief of the principle, particular instances will readily occur to those who will consider the subject. I may, perhaps, be told, that the necessities of the country demand an ample revenue. To that I would reply, if they do, it is by no means clear, that a large revenue is best supplied by such oppressive duties. On the contrary, I think it could be proved, that by checking the consumption, they impair the revenue, and by the temptation which the evasion of them offers to contraband trading, form a congenial soil for the production of crime and demoralization. In 1808, when the duty on British plantation coffee was 2s. per pound, it produced a revenue of £161,245, but in 1839, after the duty was reduced to 6d. per pound, the revenue was increased to £779,000. This is the mere direct increase of revenue, but in addition to this, we ought to consider what the nation has gained by the vast increase in the consumption of this article, and the consequent employment of more capital, the increase of labor furnished for the poor, and the indirect increase of the revenue thus obtained. And we are told, that the effect of the abolition of the sugar monopoly in Austria, was to cause that article in a short space of time to give more revenue than the whole net customs had previously given. These two examples may suffice for a specimen of the manner in which liberal legislation in commerce would act on the financial affairs of the country. And with respect to the encouragement given to smuggling, by prohibitory duties, it is stated, that the exportation of silk goods from France, from 1827 to 1838, was £3,589,594, while the quantity entered at our custom houses was only £1,875,708. The quantity smuggled was therefore £1,713,886, or 48% of the whole quantity entered at the French custom houses as exported to England. It is also a miserable policy to attempt to bolster up any branch of industry for the successful prosecution of which the natural capabilities or artificial circumstances of the country are not adapted. A learned writer observes, that every system endeavoring by extraordinary encouragements, to draw towards a particular species of industry, a greater share of the capital of society than would naturally go into it, retards, instead of accelerating, the progress of the society towards real wealth and greatness. The policy pursued by the British government, with reference to the corn trade, is a system of this description. Its effect is, to draw towards the production of corn, a greater share of capital and labor than would of itself be employed in this way. Facts prove that either the natural capabilities, or artificial circumstances of this country, or both, are not adapted for the production of a quantity of corn sufficient for the supply of its population, and it is in consequence of our persisting in confining our consumption of corn to that produced at home, we hear such a clamor about dear bread. We do not hear the same complaint about dear manufactures. Either the natural capabilities or artificial circumstances of their country, or both, are adapted to produce enough of them for ourselves, and to enable us to supply the world. Besides, no protection, as it is called, is wanted here. All the duties on manufactured articles imported, taken together, do not amount to £500,000, more than half of which sum arises from silk goods, and the manufacturers have even expressed their willingness to give up this supposed advantage. Then again compare the price of manufactured articles with that of corn. Generally speaking, it would be most unreasonable to complain of the cost of any of our numerous unfettered native manufactures. To give one instance as an example of the whole, the pen with which I am writing costs comparatively nothing, 144 being produced for a shilling, though one individual alone in this trade keeps 250 people employed. But the exorbitant price of bread is but too well known. Now why should there be this relative difference? There is nothing in the nature of things to prevent corn being in due proportion as cheap as manufactures. The reason is to be found in the impolitic restrictions we have placed on commerce, in our artificially supporting a branch of industry for which it is plain the country is not adapted. Many nations are ready to supply us with corn at a much less price than we can buy it at home, but we refuse to have it of them, and by this and other similar prohibitions, inflict on ourselves a grievous national injury. We raise the price of other commodities, we detract from the comfort of the middling classes, half-starve the poor, depress our manufacturing industry, cripple our trade, and do much towards depriving Great Britain of the superiority over the other nations of the world, which she has for ages maintained. In France, a similar plan has sometimes been pursued, to force the manufacture of different articles, and the French people being thus compelled to raise at home, articles which they could obtain at a third of the price from foreign nations, have been prevented from exporting, and therefore from growing, commodities, in the production of which France is much superior to all other countries. In fact, the trade of France in wine and silks, the most important branches of their agricultural and manufacturing industry, was once, by this attempt to divert the commercial enterprise of the nation into improper channels, almost ruined. This appears by a well-authenticated account laid before the Chamber of Deputies by upwards of 12,000 of the merchants and landholders of the Gironde, in some of whose words, as they are replete with large and liberal views, and bear directly on my subject, I shall conclude this chapter. What is then, they say, the more immediate consequence of the prohibitive system, or in other terms, of the system of monopolies? It is this, that the country which is placed under its dominion, cannot dispose of its productions to foreigners. Behold it then thrown back upon itself, and to the impossibility of selling that of which it has too much, is added the necessity of paying more dearly for that of which it has too little. Our industry did not demand, in order to make it flourish, either the favors of a monopoly, or that crowd of artificers and helps, the burden of which the self-interest of others has imposed upon the country. A wise commercial liberty, a political economy founded on nature, in connection with civilization, and in harmony with the real interests of all parties, such was its only want.